Today's topic is going to be ransomware. My name is Chris Jett. I'm a training manager in the Business and Cyber Solutions Division here at TEACS. Joining me today on the panel are Brian Chastain, Wade McCain, and John Robertson, and they're all experienced cybersecurity instructors and subject matter experts with us here at TEACS. So just a couple of minor housekeeping things. We're going to keep up with questions in the chat. So if you have a question during the chat, please type it there. We'll try and keep up with them as they come in. However, we will have a question and answer session toward the end of the discussion. All right. So just a little bit about TEACS. We are the Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service, an internationally recognized leader in emergency response. We do workforce training, emergency response training, technical assistance. TEACS is a member of the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium, as well as the National Cybersecurity Preparedness Consortium. And we are home to the National Emergency Response and Recovery Training Center, also called NERTC. Within TEACS, we have the Business and Cyber Solutions and our Cyber Readiness Center. And our goal here is to make a difference in cybersecurity. As new cyber threats emerge, we are working to develop training and solutions that make communities and organizations cyber resilient. We believe in a holistic approach. So everything from training people, processes, policies, and tools to perform collaborative solutions to enhance your cybersecurity. And just quickly, some of the things we offer here at the CRC. We have no-cost FEMA-funded cybersecurity courses that we deliver all over the United States and territories. And we can also create custom cybersecurity training and curriculum unique to your organization. We also provide technical assistance in the form of gap assessments, cybersecurity response plans. We can help you create that or review something that you already have. And then we have the ability to facilitate tabletop and functional exercises that help you test those plans. All right, so we'll jump right in. Just briefly, just want to cover what exactly is ransomware, just to refresh everyone's memory. According to CISA, it's an ever-evolving form of malware designed to encrypt files on a device that renders those files and systems that depend on them unusable, and ransom is demanded in exchange for decryption of those files. And then briefly, the consequences of what can happen with ransomware. It can severely impact business processes. It can leave you without your data needed to operate. It can interrupt mission critical services. And if you've paid attention recently, we've had some high profile cities in the US that have lost everything from the ability to dispatch fire and EMS and police to inability to issue building permits. And then of course, there's a cost when you are the victim of ransomware in time, money, and potentially your reputation as an organization. So that's kind of the frame under which we're going to have our discussion today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Robertson.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Let me get this pulled up here. There we go. All right. So last year, 2022, was a bit of a market slump for ransomware, and we all thought, you know, maybe we're finally turning the tide. Well, I got bad news. Ransomware is back in a very big way. Some analysts have put the amount of ransomware this month over last month, last year at this time. There's like about twice as much ransomware going around right now. So you can see this this huge uptick in it over the last couple months. But just so you know, there is a company called Chain Analysis, and they do blockchain monitoring of like cryptocurrency exchanges, and they are reporting that so far this year, just January through June, they're at nearly $500 million in suspected ransomware payments. And that's a bit of a projection because obviously there's a lot of people who don't want to report on whether or not they got hit. So any statistics we give you today, it's got a big asterisk of that we know about. So yeah, we're on track to meet or beat 2021 as far as ransomware payments go. And 2021 was the record. So yeah, it's definitely back in a very big way. Actually, just in the last quarter, cases are up like 67%. There have been confirmed 2,000 victims worldwide just this year. And again, that number could be much bigger than anyone wants to report on. And this is especially odd that it's shooting up at this time of year because traditionally we've seen these ransomware groups, they take summer vacations. They're getting dressed up in their business casual. They have a payroll. They take summer vacation, paid time off. So usually summer is a bit of a slow time for ransomware, but there's something going on in the world where everyone's like, no, hit them hard right now. We have seen in the last couple of years more attacks targeting Latin America. I know Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic were hit pretty bad recently. So some people were speculating maybe they were targeting Latin America as like a test run. It's really hard to say at this point. All right. So here are the big players. There's a lot of familiar names up here. Lockbit3, they've been around for in different iterations for a few years now. They've been consistently the big players. Just in the last quarter, they have averaged about 20 victims a week. So they're very busy. Now, many of these groups here are not like individual ransomware gangs. Some of these are actually tools that they'll sell to affiliates for them to use in a model called ransomware as a service. And Brian's going to talk more about that later in the panel. So these lines of distinction are not quite as clear cut as this graphic implies, because Lockbit isn't just the Lockbit gang. They're selling those tools to other people. You may also be familiar with AlphaV. They were used to be known as DarkSide or Black Matter. They've got this new project they've got going on called Black Cat, and that's another ransomware as a service that they've been selling. You may remember DarkSide actually because they were the ones who targeted the Colonial Pipeline a couple of years ago, or whenever that was. Yeah, so some of these tools have not just encryption stuff built in, but they'll also package in data exfiltration. Some of the new strains we've been seeing have remote access tool packages all wrapped into this really convenient bundle. So they're really trying to make their products seem like professional, off-the-shelf products you can just rent to do your own ransomware attacks. Malice Locker, they are kind of a hacktivist group, and they're taking an interesting angle. They were saying on their ransomware message, hey, don't pay us. We'll unlock your files if you make a donation to charity and prove that you've donated. So again, they try to paint themselves as the good guy. They always do. When they send you that ransomware message, it'll be, hey, we're Robin Hood. We're just targeting big companies that don't care about their users' data. That's the face they put on it. But if you go to their secret Telegram channels and look at what they're really into, no, they don't care about any of that. Malice Locker has been hitting Zimbra email servers. And what's interesting about this group is that they've actually been targeting Italy more than any other country. Traditionally, the US is kind of the biggest target. Sophos Encrypt has been going around, and that will have a bunch of messages that pretend to be the Sophos antivirus. And they'll encrypt all of your files with a .sophos file extension. But in the background, it's really installing a Cobalt Strike beacon to connect to a command and control center. Now, if you're not familiar with Cobalt Strike, that used to be like a pen tester's tool, is so you could model your own attacks. That tool, unfortunately, was leaked to the bad guys, and now you're going to find Cobalt Strike is involved in the process of many of these malware tools. Many of these ransomware tools will use Cobalt Strike to reach out to their command and control center and continue the attack on you. Big Head's making some waves recently just because of this this fun fact that it pretends to be a Windows update screen. So if you see one of these at a weird time of day, it might be a red flag, actually. The screen isn't really doing anything. It's just a timer that counts from 1 to 100. And while it's doing that, it's also encrypting your files in the background. Big Head's interesting because it wraps a whole bunch of other tools in. There's like 3 different like variants of it going around. So they've really been experimenting with their capabilities and what they want included in their product. So some of the things that the new variant can do is not just encrypt your data, but also take all of your browser history, take screenshots of what you've been doing, the list of all of your Active Directory users, like your product keys, everything, So, and then it also throws in some remote access capabilities as well. So what we're getting away from ransomware just being the traditional double extortion, where it's like we take a copy of your data and lock up yours, and now we have 2 ways to ransom you. Now they're trying to add more and more ways they can get data on you to extract a payment. Let's talk about Clop. Clop is a Russian group that has made the news recently. You may have heard about this. They hit the MOVEit file transfer service. It may be really hard to hack into a company's network and steal their data. You don't have to do that. You can skip that step and hack a file transfer service, and now you're the man in the middle, just soaking up all of the data that these companies think they're securely transmitting. So Clop got between $75 to $100 million out of these compromises. They hit huge targets, like Estee Lauder is one of the big ones. And what's interesting, this little screenshot I have here, traditionally, when a ransomware group steals your data and wants to hold it over your head as a ransom, they will put it on the dark web. A leak site on the dark web, you have to have a special browser, a special protocol to get to it. The download speeds are really slow. It's kind of obscure. So Clop is actually taking a page out of the ALPHV playbook, and they are trying to post their leaked data on the clear web, where you can just get to it through, your Google Chrome browser. So they're trying to make sure that their victims definitely know their data is out there, because if it's on the clear web, that means the Google web crawlers are going to find it, and you're going to be able to type in, oh, company ABC leaked data, and boom, you see a website like this just on the plain old internet with all of this leaked data. It's a bit of an experiment. The problem with putting leak sites on the clear web like this is obviously the authorities can just get those pages taken down. So it remains to be seen as to whether or not this is going to be a viable strategy for them. But yeah, it's all in the name of some kind of weird customer service, right? Where they want to make it really easy for you to know that you've been compromised and pay them. So ALPHV, I mentioned them earlier, they actually wrote a Python script and an API that you can specifically, run their code to pull real-time updates as to whether or not your data has been leaked. And then I've got a fun little one here, Nitrogen. It's pretty new, not too well known, but I pulled this one up because it is its initial vector is what we call malvertising. Bad advertisements. So you see a website like this being advertised through Google Ads, and you think, oh, it's a Google ad. It's been vetted, right? No, because it'll take you to this fake download page, which, by the way, just as a fun little Easter egg, if you actually go to the site directly, it's got a link to a little meme video. But if you clicked on this downloader to download WinSCP, a very common tool, you can see here the attack chain that it goes through. And I bring this up because Nitrogen's doing something here called DLL side loading. And that's been a big way that these new malwares are trying to get around detection. So you install a perfectly normal executable file, and it downloads these DLLs. And if you didn't know, that's just a code library. It's got some little code functions sitting around to extend your programming. Your operating system, your applications use these all the time. But what happens with these ransomwares or other malwares is they'll download legitimate DLLs and then some bad ones at the same time. And you can see that these fake DLLs will connect to command and control servers and then carry out the attack on you. And again, Cobalt Strike is involved. So that's been pretty popular. All right, now I got to keep things moving because we got a lot to cover in this hour. So I'm going to hand it off to Wade. Thank you.
All right, let me get set up here. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Name is Wade McCain with TEAX, and looking to talk about preparing for ransomware. Obviously, John really kind of showed us the stats and what's happening and the kind of the current state of affairs right now. And we can kind of see from that just how important it is that we prepare for these kind of attacks, because it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. So what do we do to prepare for ransomware? Three big things I want to talk about today. First is prevention. There's lots of work that we can do on the front side to preventative measures, and more comprehensive approach to cybersecurity to make sure that we're as secure as possible to prevent these types of attacks. Also, along with that is user awareness and training. So awareness training is really probably the biggest thing we can do to prevent those types of attacks, and we'll see why in a minute. Then the last thing I'll talk about is detection, because if you don't detect it, it's kind of hard to know the fact that it's going on and whether or not you can actually stop it or have time to stop it. And I'll talk about how important that is that you detect it very early on the front end. All right. Prevention. A couple of things I want to talk about here. The NIST cybersecurity framework. So everybody knows about the National Institute of Standards and Technology and how important they are. The DoD relies on their stuff very heavily, and it's a very good framework and a more comprehensive approach to preparing for any type of cyber attack, including ransomware. And so everything about the NIST cybersecurity framework centers around the 5 core functions. So we see the 5 core functions there: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So the actual framework has 7 steps, and I'm not going to get into those today. And really, it's just about assessing and then identifying your gaps and closing those gaps. And that's really what the framework does. But everything is centered around and pivoting off the 5 core functions. So let's talk about those 5 core functions. First of all, you've got to identify. You have to know what your assets are, not only your hardware assets, but all of your software assets. And you need to know what ports and protocols and services and document that you're using on the network. In addition to that, you also need to know what type of data do you have? Do you have any personally identifiable information? Do you have any protected health information or any protected critical infrastructure information? And knowing what type of data you have, you know what controls you need to put in place. And also on the back end, if you ever do have a data breach or a ransomware attack, and the ransomware attacks, probably at least 50% of the time, they end up being data breaches as well. And so there's a lot of legal ramifications to those data breaches. And so you need to know what rules and regulations you're held accountable for, and so that you know how to respond during those types of incidents. So identifying is just all about knowing what you have and knowing what you need to do to protect it. And so that's what you call asset management. So on top of that, we need to protect. So protecting is like doing what's called the CIS controls. So when you have a NIST cybersecurity framework, that's a comprehensive approach to securing everything. On top of that, we want to make sure that we select some controls that we want to implement, so we hold ourselves accountable to. So you have some options. You can use the NIST 853 controls like the DoD is going to do as part of the RMF, or you can use the Center for Internet Security, the CIS controls, which is also the home of MSISAC, if you're familiar with that particular information sharing and analysis center. So you take a framework, then you put in some controls in place, and the CIS is a great tool set. It not only has the 18 controls that you need to implement, but it also has what's called the CSAT tool, which is an assessment tool. The DoD uses the EMAS, but out in the private sector, we can use the CSAT tool. It does the same type of thing. It allows us to review our controls and track how we're doing. On top of that, we have the benchmarks. And so what the benchmarks are is basically some security configuration settings that we need to do on not only our network devices, but also operating systems and things like that. So there's a benchmark for everything. So let's take a simple one, for example, to help you understand. Let's take Windows 10 or Windows 11. There'll be a benchmark, and probably 80% of the security configuration settings are going to be group policy settings. So if you know anything about Windows Server or the Active Directory domain structure, then you know that the benchmarks, it's really easy to create a group policy object or a group policy setting or setup that will automatically 80% secure your machines very easily. Then you can also implement the others through scripts or other means. So the benchmarks are really cool. And then in addition to that, we have the CIS CAT Pro. And what that tool does is basically it's an assessment tool that takes the benchmark and it can scan your Windows 10 machine, for example, and let you know, is it 80% secure? Is it 40% secure? And then you can figure out which settings you still need to configure. And the DoD uses this as well, through the DISA STIGs, as well as the SCAP tool. So they have similar configuration settings or configuration tools. So you take the framework, you select controls like the CIS controls, and you use these other tools to lock down your devices, your network, and be as comprehensively secure as possible. So going back to these 5 core functions, I'll tell you what identify is. Now protect is basically taking the CIS controls and the benchmarks and actually implementing all that stuff. And that's going to be protecting your stuff. And that's going to be configuring your firewalls. That's going to be configuring your routers and setting up virtual networks like VLANs and basically segmenting out your network to make it more secure. So even if the bad guys do get in, you make it really hard for them to move laterally and do anything else or get to the very important stuff. So that's all the work you'll be doing during the protect function. The other one is detect. Now detect, of course, and we'll talk about more detect here in a minute, but detection is all about using things like an intrusion detection system, right? So to help you detect, and then you can respond and recover. And then of course, the respond and the recover functions, responding is, okay, there's a cyber attack. Now I'm trying to contain the problem. I've detected it. I'm going to try to contain it. And then recovering is having all those good plans in place, like incident response plans and disaster recovery plans, all that kind of stuff. So that framework makes sure that you do all of this stuff, lock it down to protect you from ransomware, but really any type of cyber attack. So it's a comprehensive approach to cybersecurity. And what you can do to really help you laser focus, once you approach this and you get comprehensively secure, then you can look at the CISA Stop Ransomware Guide, the latest version, and it's going to help you get laser focused on the most common vectors and what you should do to stop those attack vectors, okay? All right, so let's talk about those attack vectors. According to CISA, and of course, this latest version, NSA and FBI both participated in making sure this ransomware guide was comprehensive and it covered everything and all the attack vectors. But this slide really quickly helps you to see that specific to ransomware, what are their attack vectors? How are they getting in and causing that initial breach? Well, here's the big 6. First is internet-facing vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. So we've got to make sure that everything is patched and up to date. Those no vulnerabilities. We're not still, we're not using, like SSL 1.0. We're using stuff like TLS 1.2 and even newer protocols and configurations. And then just making sure that we don't set up like a new virtual machine on the internet and give it a public IP address, and then remote desktop protocol is enabled, right? That would be a bad misconfiguration that would allow the attackers to get in that way. And of course, you can do scans, and you do vulnerability assessments like that. You use tools like Nessus, or some of the tools on the internet, like Netcat, and they can scan your websites and web applications and make sure there's no vulnerabilities or misconfigurations, and you can lock that down. Of course, you can also do penetration testing as well. Now, another big one is compromised credentials. Well, compromised credentials, of course, happens quite a bit. And, that's why we need to teach a lot of the cyber awareness training, right? About how to create a good password, what is a good password, and all that kind of good stuff, right? And making sure that we have long, unique passwords for every account online. That would be a big thing that we could help with those compromised credentials. And we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to make things be a worse setup, for example. So we want to make sure that whenever employees leave the company, that we have good offboarding procedures, as an example, to make sure that those accounts are disabled. And all of our accounts should be, long, secure passwords and be unique. Another big one is phishing. Yeah, phishing is a huge attack vector for all cyber attacks, and ransomware is no different. So what are you going to do to stop phishing? Well, there's lots of things you can do, but the biggest one is awareness training. Of course, there are some things you can do on the email server and setting up DMARC and some of the other configuration settings, but phishing is a big one. So we got to make sure that we're training and teaching our people not to click on links, not to open up attachments. There's different types of phishing attacks as well. Another big one is precursor malware infection. Well, we're going to talk about a statistic here in a minute. 94% of the time, according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, a recent one, 94% of the time, malware is delivered today via email. That goes back to that phishing. So if we don't help people understand not to click on links and open up attachments, then obviously we can real quickly get malware. Maybe 30 years ago, malware was spread mainly through floppy disks, but it's a different day and age, and now it's email. Another one is advanced social engineering. And according to the CISA Stop Ransomware Guide, advanced social engineering is talking about some of those advanced techniques that attackers use to get in. And one of them was already mentioned, and talking about malvertising. So those advanced techniques would be, number one, SEO poisoning, which is search engine optimization poisoning. Another one, and that's just making sure that malicious links show up high in the Google search. So when you search for something, you're like, oh, that must be the most relevant one. And you click on that, boom, they're in. But then malvertising as well. You can do malvertising on websites like New York Times. On your local news station could have malicious ads that they sell the ad space, and they have malicious code. But it could also be like John showed in a Google ad, right? Google ads a lot of times come up at the top. You click on that ad, boom. So malvertising. And another one is drive-by download. And those really are the advanced social engineering techniques that are out there. And drive-by download, basically, it could be malvertising. It could be a water holing attack to attack one particular industry. It could be typo squatting, just getting you to go to a website that hosts malicious code that automatically it'll exploit a vulnerability in your browser. And just by going to the site, it's going to download malware onto your system. So that's very hard to stop, but you can do things like using the Brave browser, which is a more secure browser. And as long as you keep it up to date, hopefully there will be no vulnerability that they can exploit and drop a drive-by download onto your machine. And the last one is third parties and MSPs. That's a big one. You've heard of supply chain attacks. Well, according also to the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, last year, 62% of the time, or 62% of all data breaches, they got in through the managed service provider or through the supply chain, not just the managed service provider, but also the supply chain. So you think about third-party companies, just like we saw in the Target data breach back in 2013, they get in through the third parties, the managed service provider, or, it's just like in that particular case, it was the HVAC company, right? So maybe the company itself is secure, but not everybody connected or has access to the network is secure, and you get in that way. And then managed service providers, especially managed security service providers. We saw this in Texas with the 22 Texas towns. They got hit back in 2019. They got in through the MSP. And that's it's very unfortunate. And it even took a toll on the MSP itself in Texas. And it's really tough, but it's just hard. They'll get in, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So these are the 6 major attack vectors of how they get in on ransomware. All right, let's talk about awareness training. We've got to configure the human firewall because we're only as strong as our weakest link, and our weakest link is all of those humans that sit around networks, right? So let's say you have a corporate network that you manage and you've got, 500 end users, right? Or let's say you've got 5,000 or 50,000 end users. Well, that's 50,000 entry points into your network. That's much easier than hacking in through your firewalls and VLANs and things like that. So we've got to configure these human firewalls. We got to spend time. And some of you may use companies like KnowBe4, KNOWBE4. And in Proofpoint, there's others that can really help automate and have people practice not clicking on, phishing attacks and things like that. And those services, they'll even teach you basic cyber awareness training. And they're good, but I don't feel like they're good enough. I think in addition to using services like KnowBe4, you need to do face-to-face training like we're doing today, right? You're seeing us talking, and even better if we can all be in the same room, right? And you can really make an impact on these end users. And you can also talk about their personal life and how to secure their personal life. And we believe that if you get their attention by talking about their personal life, then they're also going to help keep you secure in your work life as well. So the big things that you want to teach on configuring the human firewall is 2 things. You want to talk about all the cyber threats that are out there, right? Because they need to know that, if I see a 1 terabyte USB thumb drive sitting on the ground, I don't just plug it into my machine, right? As an example. And then all the social engineering techniques that we've already talked about. And then they need to understand, they need to have good cyber hygiene, right? And all the stuff that goes along with that. And so these are the 2 big topics that you want to teach when it comes to configuring the human firewall. And I know I just put it all on one slide and it seems fairly simple, but I promise you, just to teach the cyber hygiene part, that's probably going to be in a face-to-face class. That'll be at least 2 hours, just covering the basics there, right? It's a big topic. And if you go into all the cyber threats, that could easily be another hour or 2, right? There's just so much to learn. So it could be like a 4-hour class and you could teach quite a bit. And you see so the big topics of course were cyber threats, malware, social engineering, phishing, quishing. And of course, quishing is QR code phishing, right? There was a big rise of that during the pandemic because, if you went to eat at a restaurant, you couldn't actually, they wouldn't give you a menu, right? You had to scan a QR code. And so, of course, malicious people thought, yeah, let me create a malicious link and maybe a fake website, and I'll get people to scan the QR code and go to that site rather than one they should be going to. So quishing is a big one, juice jacking, and that's making sure you don't charge your phone in public charging stations and stuff like that. And we already talked about SEO poisoning, drive-by, and malvertising. Those are the advanced social engineering techniques that are used as well. Credential stuffing is a big reason why you need to talk about cyber hygiene and passwords and password managers and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the dangers of Wi-Fi, right? Don't be connecting to public Wi-Fi or use a VPN and all that topic. And then USBs, right? USBs were used in the Stuxnet attack back in 2010, right? And the big thing about USB is it can jump the air gap. So even though you think you have good backups and they're air gapped and not connected to anything, and you think malware like ransomware can't crawl and encrypt those things, well, they can. And even if you have that air gap jump, if there's a way they can plug in to get to that, the other side of that air gap, they can get you that way. And then, of course, all the stuff that goes with DNS, right? And that's why you've got to have DNS filtering, and they can hijack URLs, and there's domain cousins, and there's just so many things you can do with DNS, typo squatting and water holing and just all sorts of stuff. Now, cyber hygiene, to get into that a little bit more, yeah, teach people about passwords and what it takes to create a good password. And I know we got passkeys today, we're starting to see, but the experts are saying it's going to be at least 10 years before passkeys are available on like 90% of all websites. So it's going to be a while. So we still need to teach about good password hygiene and password managers, multi-factor authentication. And then you can talk about passkeys too, so that people are aware. And then you can tell them about sites about haveibeenpwned.com, pwned.com. And that website is really good, just so that people understand, just how credential stuffing works, and they can see just how their data is breached. And if nothing else, it'll at least scare them a little bit, and they'll take cyber a little bit more serious. And of course, open source intelligence. We just think about the internet and all of our private information that's out there publicly on the internet. And then, how they should or shouldn't be using social media and leaving reviews and posting stuff on Reddit. It's all public information. And if it ever gets out there on the internet, it never goes away, right? And then, of course, all the stuff that can help them with identity theft and how they need to have good backups, and then how they need to properly dispose of stuff, right? And you see a couple of statistics there, one by KnowBe4, 90+% of the time when you get hit with ransomware, it is because unpatched software and social engineering. So you can see awareness training is a big part of that. All right, detection. So you have what's called precursors and indicators. And really what this is really showing is just some different things that you may see from a precursor standpoint, like before a cyber attack happens, things that are leading up to a cyber attack that may let you know that, hey, it looks like this is an indicator or a precursor that we may get hit. And then indicators is stuff that you might see in logs, you might see through an intrusion detection system that indicates that you're under attack. And these are examples. But what I want to talk about really here is, if you want to be really good at detect, and you need to be good, because if you don't, it's going to cause you even worse problems. They're going to move laterally and get to the good stuff, and they'll encrypt everything. And so one of the companies out there, CrowdStrike, from their experience, they came up with what's called the 1-10-60 rule. You basically have 1 minute to detect a cyber attack. You have 10 minutes to investigate and 60 minutes to contain or eradicate the problem. And if you don't meet those thresholds, they're going to move laterally on your network, right? That's what they refer to as breakout time. That initial breach, you got about 60 minutes to do all that, or they're going to break out on your network. And you know what? That's really quick. And so how do you do that? Well, you've got to have tools that help you, right? Like some of the SIM tools, like security information and event management tools, like SolarWinds, LogRhythm, Splunk, right? Those are enterprise. They aggregate all your logs from your firewall, switches, routers, operating systems, and things like that. And they help you to filter and generate reports. You can also be alerted to, something that's a cyber attack. And so there's lots of good tools like that. But also you need intrusion detection tools, right? You may have heard of endpoint detection and response, or extended, detection and response. And so really, it's kind of like the old cybersecurity tool called FireEye, right? FireEye is a very, Mandiant corporation. They're very good stuff. And now it's all part of Trellix, a company called Trellix. But between Trellix and CrowdStrike and some of the other good companies like SentinelOne or Carbon Black, those are very good endpoint detection and response tools that'll help you detect, along with those LogRhythm type of tools, okay? And another statistic I'll give you is on average, it takes 207 days for a company to detect a cyber attack, and it can take them, like an extra 70 days to contain the problem. And that's just on average. And so if you don't know that they've deployed ransomware, or you don't know that that initial malware function has taken place, sometimes they'll wait 3 or 4 days. Sometimes they'll wait 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 months and do everything they want to do before they deploy the ransomware. And matter of fact, Mandiant Corporation has said, someone else shared?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and finish your talking points, but I need to pick up.
Okay,
So
yeah, not a problem.
Chance though, man.
Yeah, I just had basically one slide left, and really what that slide is really about case studies. And if you look at all the major cyber attacks in the last 10 years, I'll leave you with this. One common denominator is that we're not getting the basics right. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about and if we look at all the ransomware attacks specifically, the city of Atlanta in 2018, the city of Baltimore in 2019, we saw Colonial Pipeline in 2021, JBS, and even Cisco this past year. Every time the bad guys get in, it's because we're not doing the basics right. And so we got to go back to the basics and make sure that we're not, we make sure that we have any remote accounts. It's only what is needed. And then we have two-factor authentication turned on in addition to that. All right, that's it. Go ahead.
All right, good morning, everyone. So I thought it would be an interesting take, and John touched up on a lot of this stuff earlier, is ransomware as a service. I want to show you guys how you actually use this stuff so you can just basically see how easy it is to use. Because I know a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, it's probably really super complicated to actually access these services, and it's really not. So I guess for starters, I'll kind of talk about how you get access to. I got a Tor screen up. You can see a screenshot of Tor. So essentially, to get access to these services, you're going to need access to the dark web. Essentially, what that is, it's a part of the internet. You use a special web browser to access. It has anonymity built into it, so it basically it kind of acts like the VPN, where it has middlemen in between, so you can't actually see who's really visiting your sites and vice versa. Tor is the big one. That's the one most people are predominantly aware of. So with that being said, you can actually install it on your device, but I wanted to showcase this particular tool, which is LinuxTels. It's just a distribution of Linux that's got anonymity built in, like that, or those are the applications that already comes with pre-installed. So if you were to use LinuxTels, it's gonna have it already installed for you. You just boot up the operating system, you're good to go. I would also add that the way this is designed as well is you're supposed to put it onto a flash drive and boot from your flash drive. So when if you're doing that, whenever you boot up into this distribution, it doesn't save anything to disk. So essentially, once you're done using the device to do whatever you're going to do on, say, the dark web, and you shut down your device, there's no evidence that you leaves behind. So interesting fun fact to use if you're looking into doing some of this stuff for good purposes, obviously. Okay, so let's say you're on the dark web. What do you do now? Here's a link to some of the popular search engines, because obviously you don't have Google to search with on the dark web. I did kind of want to point out a few things on this, as you probably see that those URLs are definitely not easy to remember. But that's just the way the URLs work, especially in Tor. I did want to quickly go over how search engines actually work, so you can see why the normal web, the dark web, doesn't show up on the normal web. And essentially, if you register a website, you have to do it with a registrar, like the domain needs to be registered. So there's obviously no registration on the dark web. And what happens with the search engine, they search, they scan all the websites, they're looking for keywords, and that's how results come back. Wade had mentioned SEO, and that's kind of, there's more to that I'm going to go into, but yes, it's going to use things like that to optimize the results of the search. The dark web search engines kind of work on the same notion. They're going to be scanning all of the sites, but they're, in this particular case, they're just scanning the .onion sites, which is the domain that that Tor uses, which stands for the undergrounder, but I'm not going to quiz you on that or anything. What else was I going to point out here? This is kind of unrelated, but I do kind of want to say something else too. So if you do host your own website, you're also going to have a robots.txt file. And essentially what that does is it tells the web crawlers not to search in those directories. That's to keep, if you have certain pages on your website you don't want people to find, that's why you include those. So it's not going to show up in these search engines. It's removed from that crawling service. But from a threat actor perspective, that's the first place I'm going to look, because now I know what directories you don't want other people to see. Kind of unrelated to all this, but it is an interesting kind of fact that goes along with how search engines actually work. But anyways, so now you are on the dark web, you got a search engine. Now you can go look for forums, you can look for marketplaces, you can do all of that. I'm not going to give you any more information as far as that goes. But what do you do with that information once you get there? Well, you need to use crypto. If you're going through this whole process so that way you can be as anonymous as possible, it kind of defeats the purpose if you go and buy stuff with your credit card, because then you're traced with the credit card. So that's where crypto kind of comes in. It's not foolproof. I guess I should quickly explain how it works if you're not aware. Is the way normal banking works is there's like a centralized server that's keeping track of all the transactions. But with crypto, there's a public ledger. And so multiple people are updating these transactions. It's getting verified multiple times, so on and so forth. That is actually what mining crypto is. You're the one responsible for doing all these transactions, these processes, and occasionally rewarded with some free cryptocurrency. But that's how the transactions take place, and it has some anonymity because of that. It's not foolproof though, like I said, and there actually is a more current, I won't say current, well, it is, I guess, than Bitcoin, but a lot of these ransomware groups are moving to Monero. They'll even offer you like a discount if you pay in Monero rather than Bitcoin and stuff. So just a little interesting tidbit to throw out there. All right, so you now have access to the dark web. You now have cryptocurrency. I'm not going to go into the details of setting up a wallet. That's too much for this conversation. But I just want you to know how you get access to these services. Couple things I want to point out as far as ransomware as a service. It is a business. It is. They have customer support 24/7 on call staff. They'll often offer savings if you bundle your packages. You can check out user reviews. They have documentation. They'll have forums where there's other support, so you can ask other people that are using those tools if how they applied certain things or how they use it and what worked well. So this is the dashboard. So one thing they will set you up with is your own dashboard, your own website to go and access. You can, if you look on here, you can kind of see some of the stuff they will show on this dashboard, such as the total number of infections, how many files have been encrypted, and the total number of cryptocurrency that's actually been paid out. You can also message the victim through here. It's just, they make it as easy as possible for you. Actually. Oh, I will also point out, this is Jokeru. This is one of the ransomware groups. That's their actual dashboard there. All right, how much does it cost? So they have a lot of different ways to pay. So there's like you can do a monthly subscription model for maybe even $40 a month. Or you can do like a one-time fee where maybe a few $1,000s, and then on top of that, they'll take a percentage of the cut. But the point I'm trying to make here with this is they're trying to make it as feasible as possible for people to use their services. So they offer both, discounts for certain things. If you're going to pay a monthly fee, it's probably going to be cheaper, especially if you're using it on a routine basis, and this is all that you're doing with your free time. So, all right, with any good software as a service product, you also have to clearly define who's responsible for what. I actually took this from CrowdStrike's site because I don't think I could word it better myself. But on the left is the responsibilities of what the person using the tool is responsible for. So we refer to these as, I had that backwards. The one on the left is the ransomware groups who's letting you use their product. So first, they're going to recruit people on forums, just basically put their name out there and advertise that their tools are available. Once they get people who are signing up for their products, there's a build your own ransomware package panel. And in fact, on that dashboard I just showed like 2 seconds ago, that was one of the options to the left. You could see you could build it and customize it to how you, what particular strand of ransomware or how it's utilized. You can put that into the package you're going to make. They create a command and control dashboard, which again was the picture of that dashboard you saw. They're going to set the payment portal for the victims, so they're going to take care of all of that. They're going to they'll even assist with the negotiations to get payment. Maybe they need a little barter system to bring down the price or something, and they'll handle all of that. And they'll manage the dedicated leak site. John talked about a leak site earlier. Essentially what that is a website that's going to put some of your data that's been leaked out. I would say it's 2 purposes. One would be that to prove to the victim that you do have their data, but also that person decides, if that victim decides not to pay, then you might just throw all their data out there as well. Like that's what the leak site is. So what the affiliates are responsible for, obviously they have to pay the ransomware group. They're the ones who are actually going to target the victims and set the ransom demands. Essentially, they're doing the hacking part of it. But when I say hacking, sometimes it's just as simple as, I'm going to talk about Colonial Pipeline. I'll kind of talk more about that as well. They're the ones doing the hacking, but sometimes hacking really isn't complicated. So it mentions on here, maximizing infection using living off the land. I'll just say most of the time, especially if you're going to try and get to do as much damage as possible, you want to be silent or at least not loud when you're getting in people's systems. So one way to do that is by not installing a bunch of tools and hacking tools to pull off what you need to do. You want to use the tools that are already installed on the device because it's less detectable. And that's what living off the land means on this particular slide. But yeah, they'll execute the ransomware, and then they'll be communicating with the victim via the portal that I showed you a second ago, and obviously the encryption keys. So I want to give you guys a real world example of this, which is Colonial Pipeline. That is, at the time, was the DarkSide ransomware group, and it was 100 gigs of data was stolen, and 5 million was paid to the. I put on here affiliate. I think it was 5 million total, but even if the group took 40% of that, that's $3 million this threat actor just got from using this ransomware as a service. And I would suspect it wasn't too many people. So that's pretty good money for a few weeks of work. All right, so I kind of went through how to use all of that. So you kind of see in a real world case study. I do want to show you 1 or 2 last quick slides though. In response, let's say you're hit with ransomware, what do you do? I'm not going to go into your response plans and things like that, but I wanted to kind of give you some of the resources that are available to everybody right off the bat. And one is nomoreransom.org. So what you do in this particular case, and this is straight from their website, essentially you just throw in 2 of the encrypted files after you've been hit with ransomware, and it basically will detect which strain, and if it has an encryption key for you that you potentially could use. So this is a really good resource. I would definitely recommend using that if you get hit, because they're going to have some of those encryption keys that you might not have to worry about at anything at all at that point. And then this one, I'm not going to go through all of this. This was actually taken from Presidential Directive, I can't remember if it was 8 or 41, but basically this is the federal resources they provide. And this is current as of like a week ago at least. But it gives a list of all the websites and phone numbers for the federal resources you can utilize, such as the FBI. What do we got here? Homeland Security, CISA, all of those types of resources. We do have the slides. I'm not sure we're going to put this video online either, but if you want to screenshot those, you have those available too. On that being said, I'm going to end there and hand it back over to Chris if he wants to facilitate any other additional questions and answers.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and Wade and John. So if you have any more questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Just briefly, we're trying to keep this under an hour, so I just wanted to just kind of summarize. We've learned today that ransomware is a huge business, that it is growing, that there are some basic things that we can do as far as education and preparation to inoculate as best we can our organizations against ransomware and other cyber attacks. So, and I just wanted to touch on the things that we offer here at TEACS that can help you with your cyber security readiness. First of all, we have no cost FEMA funded course offerings, and we're going to drop links to these things in the chat so you can see those. We can also develop courses that are custom to your organization or your industry that you're in. We can assist you with developing or reviewing your cyber incident response plan. Something that we've just recently started doing is cybersecurity gap assessments using the frameworks that we talked about earlier. And then we can also help facilitate tabletop and functional exercises to test your readiness. And the tabletops are especially good because they're discussion based. It's no pressure. And we facilitate the discussion with a scenario that we will craft with your input, just to see kind of where you are on your cyber readiness. And then I also wanted to briefly mention, and Brian, if you can stop sharing your screen real quick, and we'll put up the slides we wanted to mention our Cyber Readiness Summit in San Marcos, Texas on February 13th through 15th. 2024. The theme of the event is going to be driving a healthy and prosperous, resilient community. And so more information about that, we'll drop that in the chat as well. And it's available on our website. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I haven't seen any questions pop up. So with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll do this again. We don't have a date set yet, but we will send everyone an email so that you can register. And I just want to thank everyone again for your participation today. Thanks.
Chris, there was one question, sorry, before you leave.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We did have one question from one of our, let me see here. It looks like it was from Mr.
There was one
Yeah.
question, I kind of answered it in chat though too. Someone was asking if there's examples of people not actually, has anyone paid the ransom and not received the data? Yes, but most of the time they do. If ransomware groups got the reputation for not giving it out, people are just gonna stop paying it. So generally, most of the time they will give you the decryption fee.
Yeah, and so there were some stats that we didn't get to just briefly on that. I think the stat was only 8% of organizations that pay the ransom recover all of their data. And then 80% of those who actually pay then experience another attack later on. Obviously, now they're on the bad guys' radar as having the money to go ahead and pay. So
It's had to add to that. What they usually do is it's usually not the same threat actor attacking them again, but they will sell your information to other people because they now know you as a target. But if you're patching your systems and putting in the proper things you should have had to begin with, then it's not going to matter. So the problem is people pay the ransom and then they don't fix what the problem was, and now somebody else is going to go after them as well. So
exactly. All right. Any other questions? All right. With that, we will wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll do it again.